Hey everybody, welcome to another FB Live training. I'm Cassandra Von Worsley, the inner badass business coach and the creator of Fire Your Inner Critic, Find Your Inner Badass, and finally build your business. Now the sun is right in my eyes, so I'm not going to look at the sun, but I like the lighting way better. So I've pivoted the camera on this back-to-back double FB Live. And if you're watching on YouTube, please join our Facebook community for entrepreneurs. You can find us at facebook.com/groups/Fire Your Inner Critic. All right. So the original FB Live training that was planned for today was about impatience, but I feel really good about we've talked about impatience this week. So I am not going to talk about impatience on today's FB Live. What I want to talk about is triggers. I want to talk about my triggers, your triggers, our triggers. One of the key things of your inner leadership as an entrepreneur and using and accessing your inner leadership and being what they call emotionally intelligent, having EQ, is to be in a position of power where things don't trigger you as quickly, as easily, and as fully as they used to. And we all get triggered, right? It's human nature that we get triggered. And in fact, we get emotionally triggered by the people who know us best, who love us most, because they know exactly what buttons to push. And on today's FB Live training, I want to talk about how do you become untriggerable? Because as you build a business, most people think that the stress of building a business is when you first start in the beginning. In fact, that's the least stressful time in the beginning because in most cases, it's just you. In most cases, most people in your life are super supportive because it's a brand new thing, so it's a shiny object to them. Go 2 years into it, 3 years into it, and things aren't working out the way everybody planned. Go 5 years into it, and maybe your business has exploded, but now you have a team of employees that you now have to lead and manage, and you've never had to do that before. And that is when you get emotionally triggered, that you're heading to new levels. And you know how they say new levels bring new devils? Well, it's true. And so I want you to be prepared with your inner leadership for how do you become untriggerable? Because here's the thing. The moment you are emotionally triggered, your inner critic gets way more power than you even know. Your inner badass gets super quiet and small. And then you've got to work that much harder to put your inner badass back in center stage and to have your inner critic not be as powerful. So this idea of being untriggerable is not something where I'm saying never be triggered. We're human. We're going to get triggered. And we're going to get triggered on a daily basis by things we see on the news and things people say to us and comments people make. But what I do want to talk about is how do you, especially in the realm of building your business, how do you become untriggerable? In other words, how do you become a person who has a trigger, has an emotional trigger, but does not react emotionally, does not react rush to respond? I think that's really important to separate this idea. We're all going to have triggers. And people may not even mean to trigger us. We're all going to get triggered. But how we respond to the trigger, what we do about the trigger is everything. So I want to talk today about how do you become, especially as it relates to your business, untriggerable. And the answer comes from Pedro Koulian, who I just found out about a couple days ago. Google him. I love his interview on impact theory, which is an amazing interview. You want to watch it. And he gives this, he talks about the fact that he used to be very emotionally reactive. So people would say the wrong thing or they'd do the wrong thing or they'd show up late and he would just react emotionally. And what he learned was that you've got to think, process, and respond. If you're going to have your inner leadership intact, if you're going to be somebody who can weather the storms of a business, who can deal with the uncertainty and the unknown and the risk, you've got to be willing to think, process, and respond. And so I want to talk about that for a second because you hear think, process, respond, and you go, okay, I can do that. What does it mean to think, process, and respond? So when you get emotionally triggered, most of us don't see it coming. Most of us don't, it wouldn't be called a trigger if it wasn't pulled, right? So most of us can't necessarily predict when we're going to get triggered. So when we use this idea of think, process, respond, here's what it means. In the moment that you notice, and self-awareness again is everything, Pay attention to how you feel. Pay attention to the thoughts you're having. Pay attention to the way you feel in your body. When you get triggered, first thing you got to do is stop. Mentally, you've got to stop. The next thing you've got to do is get centered. What happens when we get triggered is we go into fight or flight, and then all of these thoughts start raging, and all of this anger starts welling up, and all of this stuff is happening on the inside of us. So the first thing you do is stop and you notice, you get aware. Second thing you do is you got to center. Now, everybody has a different centering practice. And if you do not have a centering practice as an entrepreneur, I'm going to tell you, find a centering practice that works for you. Some people go in nature and they put their bare feet on the ground. Some people meditate. I like to do deep breathing, but I also like to add to that counting backwards slowly in my head. So find a centering practice. Stop, center, and then here's the game changer. You need to recognize the story and pattern that you are telling yourself. For every emotional trigger we have, there is a story, and not a true story, that we have about that trigger. And there's a story and a pattern, a thought pattern that we're used to telling ourselves every time that trigger gets pulled. You stop, you center, and you identify the story or pattern that you in your mind. So what we do with a trigger is typically, if we're reacting emotionally, we feel the trigger, the thoughts go crazy, we go into fight or flight, and we carry the trigger even farther with the story and thought pattern that we're experiencing. So you stop, you center, you recognize the story and pattern, and then, here's another game-changing moment, you say in your own head, is this the future I want to create? I mean, decide if this is the future that you want to create. Literally, pay attention to the pattern, pay attention to the story that you're making up about this, and say, is this who I want to be? Do I want to be somebody who reacts when people behave in ways I don't like? Do I want to be the kind of person that can't take feedback? Do I want to be the kind of person that doesn't know how to communicate with myself about where this comes from? Do I want to be a person who is at the mercy of what other people think or feel about me? So you want to be in a place where you can decide, once you notice the pattern of thought, once you notice the story that you're telling, which again, when we tell ourselves these stories, they're most of the time just not true. You also want to be able to decide if this is really the future that you want to create for yourself. Then you want to breathe until your body calms. So one of the things about triggers, one of the things you'll notice, and I learned this when I was doing a master's in marriage and family therapy, when you get triggered, your body goes crazy. Your heart starts racing. You might start sweating. You start to feel anxious. And the key to calming your body down is a combination of things, which typically involves deep breathing to bring your heart rate down so you're not in fight or flight, and also self-soothing. So in the marriage and family therapy program, we learn that people actually can bring their calm back when they're triggered by just doing things that we do for babies, like, patting yourself, speaking to yourself the way you would do a child who is upset. Those kind of self-soothing techniques actually work really well to get you back to a place of being centered and calm, so you can actually have the clarity to think, process, and respond. So again, you stop when you're triggered, you get centered, you need a centering practice, you recognize the story and pattern, you make a decision, like this story might sound really good, and I may be really used to telling this story when I get triggered about this, but is this the future I want to create? Make a decision. And then you breathe until your body calms. And then the final piece of this, the final piece of how to make yourself untriggerable, is you rewrite the internal narrative. You do in the moment, once you've calmed your body down, once you've made a decision about, is this the future I want to create? You need to immediately, when you're triggered, rewrite that story. Like, if you don't want to feel the way you feel right now as you're being triggered, if you don't want to be at the mercy or whim of what other people say or do every time they say or do something you don't like, well, who do you want to be the next time you get triggered? Because you will get triggered again. How do you want to respond the next time you get triggered? What is the new story? And in your head, you need to rewrite it in that moment. Most people don't do that last step. That's why I want to sit here for a second. In order for you to break a pattern of responding to emotional triggers emotionally, You have to, in the moment, deal with it by rewriting the narrative, rewriting the story. How do I want this to go the next time I get triggered? Not how do I want other people to behave so I'm happy. Not how do I want other people to react to me so I don't get triggered. No, you're going to get triggered. But the next time you get triggered like this, the next time this happens with whoever, whenever, whatever, how do you want to respond? How do you want to show up for that? How do you want to be different the next time it happens? Because guaranteed, you're going to get that spiritual classroom. You will be triggered again and again. And your biggest triggers will get pushed a lot until you learn how to react in a way that your inner badass is leading the show. You are essentially untriggerable. And yeah, you could be mad about something, but you've now learned to tell a different story and you make a different decision, which means, and here's the powerful piece, this is why it's so important for entrepreneurs to become untriggerable. When you control how you feel in any situation, when you control how you respond in any situation, you then are absolutely powerful in your own life because you no longer give people the ability to make you feel a certain way, to throw you off your game. Nobody, here, I want to say this final point and then I'm going to end this FB Life training. Nobody can throw you off your game without your permission. Nobody can throw you off your game without your permission. So every time you find yourself trying to explain why somebody did this or somebody did that or somebody said this, or you have a YouTube video and somebody posted negative feedback and then you got sad about it, here's what I'm going to say. Nobody can throw you off your game without your permission. And the moment you start to create that new story of saying, I'm the one in the driver's seat. I'm the one who gets to decide how I respond. I'm the one who gets to decide whether I make this a bad moment or a bad day or a bad week or a bad year. The entire game changes because now you don't have to worry about changing other people. Now you don't have to worry about controlling other people. Now the only thing you've got to control if you're going to become untriggerable is you. And that doesn't mean that you're going to calm down in 5 seconds. It might take you 2 hours to calm down. But when you know that the secret sauce to you being in a good state most of the time is you, you stop waiting for other people to change so you can feel good. And that is critical in business, especially when you get employees, because guess what? When you have employees, they are not always going to act the way you want them to. They are not always going to do what you want them to. And if you are reactive emotionally to employees who trigger you, you will be pissed off a lot. You'll be pissed off a lot. So, before you ever get employees, before you ever go to that level of business, get comfortable in every situation that you get triggered to become untriggerable. It's possible. You can do it. We grow and expand in doing it. I'm growing and expanding and doing it. Listen, I get triggered like everybody else. A lot. Daily. And I'm learning how to become untriggerable. I invite you to do the same thing. Again, remember, think, process, and respond. Stop, get centered, recognize the story and thought pattern that you're doing, decide if that is the story you want to stick with and create in your future, breathe until your body calms down, self-soothe, and then in the moment, even as you're still like working through, rewrite the story. Because again, nobody can throw you off your game until you allow them to. So it's all up to you, which is a powerful thing. Because who wants to be a puppet? Nobody. Who wants to have power? Everybody. All right, everybody. I will see you on the next episode of Fire Your Inner Critic, Find Your Inner Badass, and Finally Build Your Business. Please, if you're watching on YouTube, join our community, facebook.com/groups/Fire Your Inner Critic. I will see you guys next week.